day to everybody. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to read the following statement. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated 3/16/2020, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, a roll call of attendance will be taken. So for the Finance Committee, who is present? Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
Mr. Sparrow.
Here.
Ms. Nersessian.
Here.
Mr. Alfred.
Present.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Ms. Zemer. Yep. Michelle, you there?
She's having some technical issues.
Okay. Well, Michelle Zemer is in attendance through the
Her
video.
iPad's there.
Yes. I'll recognize her when she comes. Okay. From the school committee, we have Mr. Morton.
Present.
Ms. Shaughnessy.
Blancha.
Ms. Naborski.
Present.
Ms. Koshin.
Present.
Ms. Listunwick. Or I said that wrong, Cynthia, but
That's okay. I'm here. Thanks.
okay. Okay. Ms. Hanstead.
I'm here.
Okay. And from the school department, we also have Dr. Jackson.
Present.
Okay. And do we have anybody else? Did I miss anybody? I think I got everybody. Okay. So the other thing I would just remind everybody, we will probably only be taking one vote tonight, but just for the FinCom members, if we do have to take any votes, those must be roll call by law. So if we do end up with any votes, I'll be asking for a roll call vote. Okay. On our agenda tonight is the school department budget presentation, budget request for fiscal 2021. So I will pass the audio over to Ms. Hanstead for the presentation. Now, Anne Louise, before you begin, you should be able to share on Zoom your presentation.
Yeah.
And for anybody at home who's watching this that would like to follow along, the presentations that she's going to be covering have been posted under the Finance Committee page on the town's website.
Okay. I'm going to just start this by saying I have a slight cough, and it has nothing to do with coronavirus. I have asthma and been to the doctor, and it's a bronchitis-like cough, just so everyone knows, and I'll apologize in advance. Okay, so let me open the document here. Hang on 1 minute. Come on.
Just let me know when you're able to share. I just want to make sure that you're not having a problem sharing.
I don't think I am. Hang on, I got it. I usually use the Zoom app, not from the web.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, Anne Louise, the floor is yours.
Okay. Do you want to continue with that? Okay. Can you all see them? Can you see my screen?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay. All right. Well, actually, let me ask, with respect to your preference, there are two items on the agenda that we want to review tonight. The first of two, we can do it in reverse order if you prefer. But the first is the FY20 budget recommendation from the school committee, FY21 rather. And then the second is a brief presentation summarizing anticipated costs associated with the recent shutdown of schools related to coronavirus. So can go in either order.
I would say present your FY21 budget request first, and then we'll cover the current situation afterwards.
Okay, great. You all should have a copy of this, and as Ken mentioned, it is posted on the school website, and did you say it was posted in the town as well? To the town as well, Ken?
Yes, this is posted on the town's website on the Finance Committee page.
Perfect. Okay. So let me take you through this, but I want to reiterate to everyone that this recommendation was voted on and approved by the school committee on February 26th, and a lot has changed since then, and I'll just leave it at that, but we'll go from there. There are a few slides in here I'm not going to go through in detail, but I just want to point them out. The first is a statement of purpose on the role that Holliston Public Schools serve in educating our students and our beliefs and values related to that. And I think it's really important because it does set the context for all of our requests. I'm going to read a piece of this, and then I'm going to move on and just point out a couple of other slides. The purpose of pre-K through 12 education in Holliston is to develop critical thinkers, effective communicators, and collaborative problem solvers who are self-aware, curious, creative, compassionate, and resilient young adults. I think all of those things are emphasized right now in the current environment in which we're living in. We want our students poised and prepared to pursue their passions and contribute to our increasingly complex, interconnected, and ever-changing world. Funny, I read that today, and we've presented that every year for the last several years, and it just feels more appropriate now than ever. I won't read the second half of this page because I know we have a lot to cover tonight, but I encourage all of you to do so. The next two slides cover some summative work from a committee at the high school working on the vision of a graduate. And again, I really encourage you to take a look at this afterwards because it talks to the forward-thinking vision for where we see education going in Holliston and around the world. And that is what we are trying to prepare for. It influences so much of what we're doing. It'll become, I know, instrumental as we take on the effort of developing a new strategic plan, new 5-year strategic plan next year. And I really think it provides a foundation for everything that we're doing. It comes down to developing global citizens, balanced lifestyles, lifelong learners, innovative thinkers, with character, and effective communicators. This isn't a grand departure from where we've been, but all of these boxes have very distinct and specific underpinnings with respect to the programs, the staff, the professional development, and the technological implications, as well as the infrastructure of the building in which we're teaching our students. So I think that's all important to consider as we look at the budget moving forward. I'm going to start right at the top and just lay out exactly what we're asking for on one page, and then we'll dig down deep. And I would ask you to just sort of note your questions along the way rather than do any hand raising right now, because it will allow me to get through the details faster and then for us to have an open dialogue. So just to start, and this is, by the way, there's some formatting tweaks in here and nothing more, but I will send out an updated presentation after we get off the phone. But there's no material differences in the content. So we'll start with the operations budget. We entered the year with an approved appropriation of $34,947,263. When you add to that, oh God, I'm sorry, what's happening here is that the visual on you guys is messing with the screen. I'm trying to push you out of the way. There we go. Let me push it here. Let me do this. There we go. When you add to that the estimated fixed cost increases for next year, as well as the FY21 recommended initiatives from the school committee, that increases the total by 1.6 million roughly, and brings the new total recommended appropriation to $36,598,807. That recommended increase represents 4.73% increase over the FY20 budget for this year. We recognize that's a meaningful number and above the Finance Committee guidelines. And I think it's really important to say that because we don't want anyone to walk away from this thinking that even 3 weeks ago we took that lightly. We did not. So I just want to break it down just a little bit. The fixed cost increases of $949,000 represent a 2.72% increase over the approved appropriation for this year. And while that is well above guideline, it is still relatively modest when compared with other competitive districts. And it really is the straight line cost of just keeping things running as is. That does not reflect an increase in programs or staff, short of some, adjustments when people retire and things like that. It really is just running things as is. We often refer to that as our run rate. The recommended new initiatives we're going to go through, and I just want to point out up front, again, when we sat down and really looked at these, they don't fit in the luxury box, if you will. They are very thoughtful recommendations that came from the administration. Many of them pertain to special ed and or other support systems that and positions to really manage our most needy students, if you will. There are a few other positions in there that we feel are essential to just operating efficiently, and we'll take you through those as well. With respect to capital, the recommended capital increase is just over $1 million, and that does reflect some significant investments in the building infrastructure and campuses, as well as technology investments. And I think it's important to point out that in our recent conversations, especially in front of the select board, where we were being asked questions about what we're doing to maintain our buildings and infrastructure with regard to submitting a statement of interest to the Mass Association of School Buildings, we referenced this very number because we do take it seriously. We are not neglecting anything. We want to make sure we are investing in maintaining our buildings as is required by the state to be even considered to be entered into their building program. So we'll go through that as well. The following slide is one that we developed, as I said, 3 weeks ago, and it summarizes the assumptions in this budget. And I felt it was important to put an update here because clearly the current environment has changed a little bit since then. I'm going to go through the assumptions because they are relevant, but we do also recognize that with the COVID-19 outbreak, especially in Middlesex County, and some of the emergency announcements being made by the State House and local authorities, that things could change. But this budget that we're about to present was developed and guided by our 5-year strategic plan, which expires in FY22, and we're only 2 years away from that. As the statement of purpose that I read at the beginning of this presentation, our district-wide improvement goals, which are all published and very detailed at the building and program department level. We're also assuming that grant funding will continue at FY19 levels, except as noted in this presentation. And of course, the circuit breaker reimbursement is assumed to be remaining at 70%. another important one, that the community expects progress and improvements that have been gained to date to continue. It's a critical assumption because if the community wasn't expecting a high level of performance and delivery in our education here in Holliston, it would change the budget dramatically. How this all looks going forward is, TBD. It's a discussion for all of us to have, but this is sort of the baseline of where we're starting. So let's just take a closer look at the fixed cost changes. At a very high level, these break down into three buckets, and this is what makes up our run rate, just business as usual, if you will. Salaries are expected to increase next year at just over $1 million, so that clearly represents the lion's share of this cost. There is no specific contractual arrangement that is driving that. This is based on some rough assumptions, and we can talk about those in executive session, but I won't go into those any further here. Other fixed costs, except for special education, represent $95,275 in this estimate. And in fact, special education costs this year have declined by almost $177,000. That's largely due to a number of students who are aging out of the system, which is always nice to see that they've been able to progress through Holliston Public Schools. But the number that are aging out isn't balanced by as many students coming in at the moment. So for the moment, we've actually seen our special education costs decline a little bit. So the net impact of that is a 2.72% increase over this year's budget, and that represents $949,920. And just for comparison, last year our fixed cost increase coming into this year was about $1.2 million, so it's definitely an improvement over that. In the following slide, it's just a snapshot of the budget drivers underneath those fixed costs. So if you were to break down the $949,000, you can see here where the pressure points are, what's sort of going up, what's going down. You can see second to the bottom, a credit, if you will, of $176,000 for special education. That's the number we just mentioned on the prior page. That does help reduce costs. And then, of course, right at the top, the contractual obligations and salary increases are really the key driver at 2.95%. Fuel and oil actually was pretty good this year, so that was only a 0.25% increase, and everything else is much more modest. So I won't dwell on those. But certainly, if you have any questions about these, just make a note and we can get to those at the end. So now I'm going to go through the school committee specific recommended initiatives for FY21. These are either positions that we're still trying to get reinstated, new positions, or program supports we're trying to put in place. So the first covers Placentino, and on this chart, just for the sake of comparison, but I'm not going to go back and forth in our discussion, we're showing what the administration originally requested, what Dr. Jackson requested, and what the school committee is requesting. I'm largely going to focus on the school committee and just share with you up front that our recommendation at this point actually matches Dr. Jackson. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes we'll add something and sometimes we'll delete. But in this case, with respect to every recommendation he made, we did match it, and then we actually did have a very meaningful discussion around tuition-free full-day kindergarten and came back with a proposal on that. Before I go into full-day kindergarten, I just want to mention that the first position here that both the administration and Dr. Jackson recommended is increasing a speech and language pathologist by 0.4 to get that up to a full-time FTE. So we have somebody who's working 60% of the time, and if we could add that 40% difference, we could get them up to a full-time equivalent. And I think you all know that when you actually have an FTE in place, they can be much more efficient than when you're trying to divide their time across. So that's helpful. With respect to tuition-free full-day kindergarten, the full cost of this, if we were to do it in 1 year, one fell swoop, is about $624,000, $625,000. We've tried to find a way to address this cost for, I think, as long as I have been on the committee. And it just hasn't been something we've been able to manage as a district, as a town, and we understand all the complications around that. But as sort of I don't want to call it a final, we really collectively want to see this addressed this year. So what we're proposing is a 3-year phase-in strategy where we pick up a third of the cost in the operating budget in FY21, a third in FY22, and a third in FY23, such that by the end of FY23, the town has reduced the cost of kindergarten to zero, eliminating the barrier to entry for so many families. This is not an easy burden, even though many families, in fact, 98% of our families are paying it. It doesn't mean it's a fair and equitable cost to levy on them. And we feel incredibly strongly about that. And there are still a handful of families for whom this is a financial hardship. And we do work with those families when we can identify who they are. But this has become an issue that we are deeply concerned about, not only for our individual families, but frankly, from a competitive standpoint. I want to quickly share with you what has happened over the last 7 to 10 years. In FY13, nearly 100% of districts were offering full-day kindergarten. And it's interesting because at that point in time, the dialogue was just around whether full-day kindergarten should be offered and should be a requirement, if you will. But even then, and this is 7 years ago, 75% of the districts in the Commonwealth were offering kindergarten for free. And you can see the tuitions were increasing from there over a range, but Holliston was sitting in the most expensive bucket. As time has passed, the vast majority of communities in the Commonwealth have begun to offer free full-day kindergarten. And in 2019, last year, nearly every surrounding community around Holliston was offering full-day kindergarten, with the exception of, I want to say it was Millis. I'm looking at my map, but you can see right here, this little circle is Holliston, and everybody around us, except for Millis, was offering free full-day kindergarten. If that doesn't have an impact on your real estate values for young families considering moving into town, I don't know what does. So if you look at this, even just over the last year, now 85% are offering free full-day kindergarten, and even more communities around us are offering free full-day kindergarten. And what's interesting but hard to see on this map, so you can take it home and look at your leisure, the shading of the remaining communities is changing. When you see that, it means that they are beginning to scale down with a phased-in plan. So if you see something go from dark to medium or light orange, it's because the cost is going down on this scale, and that means they've begun to introduce a phase-out plan on tuition, or that they've reduced it at least to a lower level. But we are aware of some of these communities that have already begun to implement a phase-out plan. So we expect to see over the next year or two several more communities immediately surrounding us go white, if you will. Forgive me. Okay, so that is Placentino. And that takes us to Miller. There are only two positions with respect to Miller that we are highlighting here, and we're hopeful we can make this happen because it's relatively short money in the context of our overall budget. And that is that we'd like to bring two tutors, a math tutor and a reading tutor, into the district at 15 to 16 hours a week to help support the Miller students. We could probably go on more about what they will be providing, but it's supplemental to everything that is happening there, and we think it's essential for a host of reasons. But these are smaller ads, so I'm just going to move on. At the Adams Middle School, there is one position in particular that we're asking for, and that's a student management assistant. We are seeing across the district a number of challenges in managing student behaviors, and without getting into a lot of detail on that, we want to really just explain the context of it. What happens when we're dealing with either discipline issues or just trying to manage things? It could even be in a situation where students are put in the cafeteria, if you will, or auditorium. We're pulling on our administrators. It is not uncommon to see David Jordan or Jess Beatty, our principal and vice principal at the middle school, pulled into a situation where they're managing a bunch of students in a classroom or in an auditorium or in the cafeteria. And that can get down to quite literally David Jordan wiping down tables. And this is not what we're paying our administrators to do, and it's not how we want to use their skills and talent. It's exhausting, it's distracting, and there's so many other critical priorities for them to be spending their time on. So that really is what this role is about. It's similar to a position we have at the high school that we brought on over the last year or two, and we think it's really needed at the middle school. Okay. Most of the additional positions this year actually are up at the high school. I'll go through these pretty quickly. Over the last several years, we've tried to secure support for our director of athletics up at the high school, Matt Baker. He is the only athletic director in the Tri-Valley League without an assistant, and while it may be hard for everyone on this call to fully grasp the roles and responsibilities of an athletic director, they are vast, and some pertain to just making sure, everybody's, safe out there. But a lot of it is administrative, logistics, et cetera, everything from organizing schedules across, the 20 some odd teams we've got up there, which is especially complicated, as if you can imagine what Triple E did to Matt Baker overnight. He had to reschedule hundreds of games and matches, et cetera, in the spring just to make sure our student athletes could play safely. In addition to that, all the ordering of equipment and managing inventory, working with our athletic trainer and ensuring policies, et cetera, are all being followed. There's just a host, informing our coaches and communicating with all of our coaches, and managing communications with parents and supporting HABA, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot. And when things fall through the cracks, the parents with the pitchforks are at our doorstep. And we're doing a disservice to our students. We're not supporting our coaches properly that way, and we're certainly undermining Matt Baker's ability to be effective. So that recommendation is not a new one. It's a position that I believe we had many years ago and was eliminated at some point, but that's something we're hoping to restore. Next one is restoring the SPED department leader stipend. It would allow a department leader to focus more specifically on special education initiatives and issues across the board. It's a small number. It's $2,800, $2,813. And forgive me, I didn't mention the amount for the athletic, the assistant to the athletic director. That was $33,600. Next on the list is something I don't think will come as a surprise. We're asking for a permanent substitute teacher to be added to the high school staff at the cost of $22,500. This is not only an investment in trying to mitigate the impact of having several classes at a time in the cafeteria when we are unable to get a substitute, but frankly, it's much more cost effective because even if we could get, we calculated out the number of hours we would need with on-the-spot substitutes, given the rate that costs, we would substantially save money. I think that cost is for the same number of hours that a permanent sub could fulfill would be closer to $66,000 or something like that if we were to do it by the hour with sort of ad hoc substitutes coming in. And for context, if anyone on the Finance Committee, I should have said this first, is unaware, we are facing a challenge that is a challenge across the state. It's a supply and demand issue. We, in a very full economy like we just had, you have a situation where everyone is gainfully employed and substitutes are not available. And we've had a lot of difficulty with that. I know your first thought is going to be, well, that might change. That's possibly true, but it's not going to change enough to make a difference here because we need qualified individuals coming in the door. But more importantly, I think especially as we're facing an environment where we don't know what's going to happen with this virus and it could impact our teachers over the many months to come, including next year, we don't want that to be an issue in the classroom. So I don't want to misrepresent this and say that this is our strategy for dealing with coronavirus. It wasn't. This was here long before that. But we believe it's an economically wise decision to make and one that will help get students out of the cafeteria and back into the classroom. Finally, we're asking for the addition of a speech and language pathologist. It's only a 0.2 FTE increase. We have somebody at 80% today, and I think it's easy to understand why the difference between 80% and 1 FTE is not all of, it's like a small difference to get us to a full FTE to allow them to be as efficient and effective as possible. I'm sure you've also got questions along the way here about which of these positions has a potential benefit impact. And so to that end, I sent you a spreadsheet that is available to the public as well. It's a summative spreadsheet for all of this. And in that spreadsheet, you'll see the details on potential FTE impacts. You can look at the cost of that, or at least the total number of FTEs that would be impacted, that would impact benefits. Next, we move to our district-wide technology initiatives, which really is where our capital quest begins. And the district-wide technology initiatives cover 3 areas. The first is our annual quest for Chromebooks for grades K, 6, and 9 for the plan. And when I say the plan, I am referring to the annual replenishment plan that we regularly update and have submitted each year for the last couple of years to the Finance Committee, and it's something we maintain pretty carefully. Basically, the way this works is we keep our devices in force until end of life. That averages about, I'm going to say 4 to 5 years, depending on usage and the state of the hardware, if you will. And then we're trying to cycle through them, so, with a couple of grades at a time here, so that we're not this situation where we let them all run, but then we have to replace, half of them or all of them all at once if you will. So we're proposing a 3-year replacement for next year. I'm just going to step down the slide here. This slide is in your deck for anybody watching at home. It'll be difficult to read the numbers on this or understand what's in here, but basically it shows that cycling of year by year, grade by grade. It's a waterfall chart that shows the replenishment strategy. I will tell you, I want to make sure that we're always giving you the most current information. And this year we did. We were the recipients of a gift of a number of Chromebooks from a citizen, and I know Dr. Jackson will weigh in on that. I mean, Brad, feel free to pull yourself off mute if you want to share that detail. But we also recently, just over the weekend, this same individual was generous enough to offer another 50 Chromebooks to help us get through the current situation and allow us to move toward a distance learning possible model if necessary. Brad will go into that a little bit more when we get into the next presentation on emergency funding. But this chart may need to be updated with some of those figures. So in addition to supplying devices to our students, we need devices for our teachers and administrative staff as well. And in fact, that's probably the bulk of this request, because we're at a point where we need to replace some as well as enable their teachers. And just put this in context, the way this works is our teachers need to be connected to our students and monitoring what they're doing. And that's not just monitoring them in the classroom. We set the devices up. The teachers have the ability to remote monitor. I want to be careful. I'm not suggesting they're like Big Brother monitoring what's going on in a child's room. What they can do is simply see which students have turned in assignments, which students are logged in, et cetera, for their class at the moment if they were to do online learning. So there's remote monitoring and connection capability, and they're able to supply assignments through the system, et cetera, et cetera. So everything does have to be set up for that. And then finally, we need to invest in some additional file servers. That's all of these three costs only $21,000. The teacher devices are coming in at $244,820, and the Chromebooks for students this year are $120,478. The district-wide student services initiatives, very specific this year to two that we feel are very important. The first is the Mood Check program. This is a program that was instituted a few years ago and paid for through a grant. And last year, we were also able to cover it with money from Governor Spilka, was able to provide to us. But we're now at the point where we don't have any funding to cover this program. So the program is a depression screening initiative, and it's been very effective. And I want to explain at a high level how this works and why it's not something that we're really willing to forgo. It's a survey that is conducted among students at the high school and the middle school, it's grades. And what it does is screen them for potentially being at risk. It's confidential, and the results of the survey are provided to a third party at Wellesley College. That it's part of the Wellesley College. Oh my God, I'm going to get this wrong, and I'm an alum. It's the Wellesley College. I think it's the Women's and Children's program there.
Centers for Women.
And thank you. Somebody get me straight. Wellesley College Centers for Women. So what they do then is compile the results. And then if there's a child who is at risk, they reach out to the family to offer resources to them or point them in the right direction. It does not come back to the school. And the reason for that is that when students and families think their guidance counselors or teachers or administrators are going to get hold of this information, they don't answer the survey honestly. So we feel very fortunate that we've been able to engage with the Wellness for Women on this program, and it's been very, very helpful. Each year, it's very interesting to see the numbers that, that we get results in aggregate, and I don't want to reveal those, but we believe we're helping more than a few children get pointed in the right direction and get the help they need. In addition to that, we're asking for an out-of-district liaison to help manage out-of-district placement. This really is something that we're asking. By itself, it would be like a $90,000 position, but we think we can combine it with a director of social, emotional learning and wellness, which we'll get to in a moment. By combining those two, we can save half of an FTE. But the out-of-district liaison is there's a lot of work attached to that role with coordinating students out of district, but more importantly, working with students so that we can potentially bring them back in district to help reduce costs. And that just requires some day-to-day management and really knowing the cases of these students as individuals. We get by doing it today, but it's difficult and time-consuming. And I also don't know if you are aware, but it's public knowledge, but our beloved Director of Student Services, Meg Pineri, has resigned and is moving back to her home district where she began her educational career, and I believe where she lives in Attleboro. So this is something that Meg has really been managing, and it's a lot to ask the director and her support staff. So we're really hoping that we can bring somebody back on to do this. Finally, finance and operations initiatives. Some are affecting the operating budget, and there's a couple in capital. These are not new. Again, we have covered a number of these over prior years, but typically we are looking for some maintenance and custodial specialists, one maintenance individual for $55,150, and then two custodians. Two custodians at $30,909 total. I'm going to make sure that's correct. So I recommend one FTE custodian, so I'm not sure why it's two up in the blue note. Something may have changed there. Again, this is not really a question of whether we need the staff. We need it. We're getting by right now, but there's a definite need and I think opportunity to be able to expand what we're doing by having our own dedicated staff on hand and under the direction of not only the current custodial staff, but Keith Boudet, our business manager. The second of items here, let me cover the last one. Transportation support specialist. Today, Keith Boudet does a lot of this work, and it is an extensive amount of work. And as we look to, as we move toward delay start times, there is a lot more involved in managing our transportation contracts and billing, et cetera. It's an extensive amount of work, and most districts do have somebody responsible for this. So we are looking for some incremental support on this. Finally, the campus and infrastructure repairs. Committee and field, turf and track really is end of life here. We are on borrowed time, and potentially there are some safety issues that could come out of turf that needs to be, it should, I say just turf, but because the track was resurfaced. But we're concerned about it, and we don't want to let it go. And it is in the capital asset management plan. We've been tracking this for a while, and we had it on here this year because this was a critical item that we just don't want to let it go. Now, in the face of where we stand today, maybe that's something we take a look at, but we do not want to suggest to the community that if this were delayed, that there wouldn't be any issues. We can't promise that because potentially could be, and that would mean shutting down the field. And there's only a certain time of year when you can replace a turf, and it's in the summer. The Miller roof repairs, this goes along with making sure, as the MASC has said, that we are actively and consistently investing in our buildings, and there are some repairs to the roof at Miller that just need to be done at this point. So that's $125,000. The turf, $500,000. That brings those capital requests to $625,000 here. That's separate and apart from the capital requests associated with the technology. The finance and ops total comes to $94,072. Curriculum and instruction initiatives, there's some position here, and this is the other half of the, let me go back up just to remind you. We had the out-of-district liaison from student services up here at $45,000, and the goal is to combine that with the social emotional learning and wellness director to create one FTE in total. So this one really should say a half, if you will. You'll notice that the cost was brought down to $90,000 for a dedicated position that the administration requested, to a shared position, which is what Dr. Jackson recommended and what the school committee has endorsed. Last but not least is the Director of Human Service, Human Resources. This is a position that we have looked into carefully and considered in the past, but we are bringing it up this year because we feel it is essential. We're managing an organization of 500 employees. And if you can imagine everything from hiring, onboarding to, connecting with the staff and Dr. Vitello on, professional development and considering exit interviews, job descriptions, there's a host of responsibilities that fall under this that today, quite frankly, are managed largely by Dr. Jackson in combination with Day and Dr. Vitello, and a little bit of support from Lisa Aronian. It is a yeoman's job, and the fact that we are able to lean on our current central staff is terrific, but it has become exhausting and wearing, and it's not something we're going to be able to sustain. And perhaps more importantly, there are certain things that are not getting done and haven't gotten done because we just don't have the bandwidth. And I think it puts us at risk. There are many job descriptions that do not yet exist for many, many positions that have been brought up to us by the HST. In addition to that, there are policies and procedures that are not documented and ideally would be documented. And it requires someone who's trained and an expert in education and really understands this. And it's really a full-time job to get all of that done, including the things we're just not able to get to today. I want to point out that this is not somebody who would be involved with or managing benefits. That's today managed at Town Hall, and that's where it should be. So we're not at all suggesting that those responsibilities should be migrated over. So this is really independent. There's plenty to do outside of benefits. And that's, sort of where we're at with this. If anyone has any questions about this, even after this call, they could shoot those questions either to me or to Dr. Jackson. There is a lot of detail, and in fact, there's a very detailed document that Dr. Jackson prepared for the school committee. I didn't send it on to everybody today because it's a lot of information. We can forward it and post it again. It's up on the school committee site if you want it to get a better understanding of the specific roles and responsibilities here. So if you take all of that and summarize it by building and or department, if you will, this is the summary that you get. And you will see this is how we get down to, on the bottom right, the 4.73% increase, which is $100,000 in operating expenses, and then there's $1 million in capital requests. You can look at this chart on your own. We've just gone through it in detail, but I think you can kind of see how we got here. And I'm hoping that as you consider all of these requests, even in the current environment, you'll see that, I think you'll see why the school committee struggled. It's definitely, we sharpen our pencils, go back to the table and say, gee, well, maybe we could do without this or that, perhaps. But I don't think we came to the table with anything that represents, a frivolous request, if you will. And when we look at their communities around us and comparable districts, which we really try to do, the one thing we can say is that this overall budget, even at 4.73%, is not out of the realm of what we are seeing in other towns and districts. It may be more than the 1% guideline, and again, we really do respect that, but it's not, there's nothing in here that we felt was really optional. That's probably the best way I can describe it. So in summary, we supported the superintendent's recommended budget. We added $208,000 to include the first year of the school year plan to eliminate kindergarten tuition. We did consider, actually it's not in here, it's not in these calculations, adjusting the HR director down to an HR manager, and I think there's a possibility of doing that, which would save us $15,000. And then because you asked, and we want to address that, these are the highlighted priorities within our budget request, but we don't have them in priority order. So I'm not suggesting that the tutors at Miller are more important than a director of social and emotional learning and wellness, just to give you a sense of where we think the pain points are in the budget and things that are most critical, separate and apart from the capital request.
Somebody's talking to. Is somebody else in the room?
Hello? In the appendix to your document, I won't go through it, but you do have the map showing the evolution of tuition-free full-day kindergarten. And finally, just because I think it serves as a good reference point, last year we spent a lot of time examining user fees and tuition and full-day kindergarten fees fall under this. I think it will give you some perspective why we believe tuition-free full-day kindergarten is so important and just how onerous these are to the community and families in town. And, frankly, we'd like to eliminate all of these, and we really tried to come up with a proposal to do so last year. But at this point, we weren't able to do that last year. We're looking to try to find a way to at least address full-day kindergarten this year. So that's in the appendix, and you can take a closer look at that. I'm just going to scoot back to the overall slide. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, Anne-Louise said, just let me know when you're done, and then I'll go through the roll for questions.
I am done.
Okay, then we can start. Let me just get the participant screen up so I can keep track of who I'm talking to here. Let's start with Mr. Maxwell.
Oh, I feel so lucky. Hello, everyone. Ooh, I can't even turn on my video. There we go. Hello. So I appreciate your transparency with your proposal, the thoroughness of your proposal outlining where all these costs are going. In light of the tri-board meeting, I'm going to keep my concerns very brief. I do have a number of concerns with the budget you've proposed. The three concerns that really hit me hard are, do we have enough money to cover all these costs? Do these costs include the fully loaded cost of the number of FTE you've added? And in light of the very recent economic uncertainty that's going to hit all of the taxpayers in our town, those are my concerns. And I don't know if I'd be able to support this budget if I were asked to vote on it right now.
So totally understand, Tim. Thank you. That's excellent. Those are so much as the question is observations, and I totally understand that. I think the committee at large here's you on it. Let me answer your first question with respect to fully loaded costs. The short answer is no. We didn't add in the benefit costs because what we're trying to show you is what we're asking the town to appropriate in terms of our operating budget, and the incremental benefit costs hit the town for sure, but in a different line item on the town's budget. However, in the spreadsheet that I sent to you, you can see, and I'm also happy to send along the actual Excel document so you can see with it, but you can see the actual FTE impact and whether they're, the percent FTE, the benefit impact, yes or no, and then you just have to kind of calculate that across the number of positions that we're asking for, if you will. Forgive me. And the one number I need is the average cost for FTE. We use that every year, and I don't know what it is this year. So I can update that sheet for you after the call or in the morning and get you a quick estimate on the total net impact of this request in terms of benefits.
It's going to be 5 something.
What's that?
I believe that was just somebody who's not muted.
Okay, sorry. Next.
Okay. Mr. Sparrow.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Anne Louise, thank you for this presentation. You have a lot of great detail here, and I really appreciate that. Just a couple things. I'm not going to talk about the economic conditions because we kind of don't even know what to think about any of it. So it's kind of hard to really sort of process that. I'm just going to talk about the budget as it looks. Irrespective of that, we'll talk about your additional requests later. I had two things. I have two comments and then one question. My first comment is I was a little disappointed. We got this presentation about an hour and a half ago. And there's a lot of detail in here, and I really wish we could have seen it even a couple of days ago to be able to process. And I know there's a lot going on and stuff like that, but it's nice to be able to look at something with this much detail with a little bit of time, and not just having to see it almost for the first time at the meeting. It's a little bit challenging to really process, to be able to understand and absorb a lot of the information here. My second comment is I know there's some expensive things in capital, and it's a lot of capital. I mean, you're asking for more than half a capital budget that we've looked at in guideline in these requests. And some of these things I do wonder and question whether or not they should be going through capital, if they should be going through other means. I know that those are sort of mechanisms that we have to talk about and process. I just wanted to make that comment about the capital budget. And so my third thing is a question. It's a little specific, but on page 17, you talked about the admin support, the $244,000 for devices. Let's see if I can pull it up. I can give you the exact number. It's on page 17 of the. Yeah, that. How many devices is that? The 244. Back one more. We just had it. The $244,820. How many devices is that, and how much as a percentage of the total devices are being replaced or being requested in that number?
Brad, can you talk to the exact number of devices? I think it represents about a quarter or a third of our total devices, but it's also, we're talking about incremental. So grades 6 and 9 would be replacements, and we have, it may not even be a quarter because we have essentially grades 5 through 12 enabled. Then we're asking.
But you're talking about Chromebooks. I'm not talking about the Chromebooks. I'm talking about the teacher and admin support device replacement. The $244,820 line.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah. Can you address that, Brad?
I can. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, proceed.
Yes.
All right, this is Brad Jackson, Superintendent of Schools. That specific request is for a wholesale replacement of all teacher and staff technology equipment, specifically 294 units at $715 a piece. Those are $750 a piece. That is for laptops for all staff members, teachers, and in particular, and also replacing desktop equipment for office staff. 32 units at $760 per unit. So there's 294 laptops at $750 per unit and 32 desktops at $760 per unit. Total $244,820.
And that represents the entire, all those computers that in those,
yeah,
for the teachers and administration?
It's a wholesale one-to-one replacement, meaning everybody who has a device is getting a new one. We have come to the conclusion that while Chromebooks are adequate for 95% of student use, they are no longer adequate for staff use. We are finding that, and so we are we're bringing we haven't replaced Chromebooks for staff since probably they're 4 or 5 years old anyhow. So this is now that it's time for replacement, we are going back to laptops for staff.
Is there a plan after, beyond this to have a gradual replacement process, so that way it's not going to be a big, huge request every, say, 5 years, or is it going to be something where it's a sort of meted out as a $50,000 every year or something like that?
Well, as you point out, when you do a wholesale request, you have to figure out so that doesn't become habitual every 4 to 5 years. We spent a considerable amount of time working with staff to try to come up with a replacement unit that could both last a long period of time and be accessible to the current technology that's available in terms of display units and things like that. So we've actually been delaying staff device replacement for 2 years since our Director of Technology arrived in order to come up with a better plan, frankly. So this is, I'll be the first to admit, this is somewhat a issue of our own making, but we certainly didn't want to replace things without a plan. So I think moving forward, we can develop a plan to subsequently to replace on a more gradual basis. But at this point in time, we're kind of at a point where a lot of our current technology that's in the hands of our staff is unrepairable and really needs replacement.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. That's all the questions I have. Thank you, Ken.
I just want to address your two other requests here, or questions regarding capital. Dr. Jackson just went through the details of the technology piece, and there's no question that replacing committee and field is like a big gulp. Then it's going to be a big gulp no matter when we do it, and we just kind of hit that point where we felt like that was the next big ticket item, if you will, in terms of facility improvement. And I have to be honest, like, there's not going to be a year when we don't have something like that. And I think one of the things the town is going to have to consider is, if we don't do it now, that's fine, except that we potentially have to shut the field down. But it could then bang up against replacing another roof or windows or the septic system. And I think that's what we don't want to find happen, is that this all at once. And we know we're looking at upwards of $10 million in costs over the next, 5 to 10 years, especially with respect to the high school. So I don't know what a better plan is, but we do know when things are approaching their end of life or are past them, and that's where we're at with the committee and field. But I do appreciate that on top of the technology request, it's a lot under the capital heading. And you listen, I want to just tell you, fair point on timeliness. There are a couple of things I just want you to be aware of. Normally, we would have sent this out. We have been engaged in negotiations with HFT, and I can't go into that, but we actually finished our negotiations last Thursday and have a tentative agreement, which we will review with the liaisons with the Finance Committee in executive session. There was a lot going on, but we have to present that first to the school committee this Thursday. So we were kind of up in the air between that, and those negotiations took place several days last week in the midst of trying to deal with the onslaught of issues that came with the coronavirus and school closure, and changes to other events in town. And I just want you to know that that is the only reason we have been swamped from top to bottom. So I certainly do appreciate that. But the other thing is, we weren't sure we were going to be presenting this tonight. That was the plan. It was certainly on the agenda, but there was some discussion over the last 72 hours that it potentially could get delayed. So I do apologize, but that there was some rationale behind that, and I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you have any further questions, Mr. Sparrow?
The only other thing I wanted to point out, I'm looking at the CIP that's on the town website, and I don't see the some of the information about, like, those teacher replacement, that $244,000 laptops. There's $90,000 for replaced teacher laptop units for Adams. So it's, I understand, appreciate that it took time to put it together, and I appreciate that. But I just, it's a big ask, and irrespective of other extenuating circumstances, and it's a little disappointing we didn't get a little bit more of notice in terms of our capital planning to know that some of those things were down the pike. I do appreciate, and I will point out, that the commission turf is on here. So I do appreciate, that's there, and that we are aware of that, and that's great. But it would have been good to have that some sort of an understanding of some of the scope of some of those other requests. And that's all I was going to say. So thank you, Anne Louise, and thanks for putting this together.
Okay. Ms. Nersessian, I believe you're next.
Is it me?
Yep.
Okay, when it was unmuting, I couldn't hear you, so sorry. And sorry for the echo. This is a bad phone line for some reason. Anne Louise, thank you very much for going through everything. I have a few questions, and if you want to take anything offline and just email me, it's fine. One thing I was wondering is a lot of this is incremental increases from last year's information, and one of the things that we look at in each of the budgets is what is the true actual spend for the current year, and how does that relate to what was budgeted for last year? And so I was wondering if you had that information, because I would assume some areas may be over to some degree and some may be less. And as I looked at the fuel oil amount that you had budgeted for next year, it was up 0.25% of 87,000. But I would have to believe, given the warmth of this winter, that what we budgeted for this year is probably the actual spend is probably under. So I'm trying to get a handle on overall what is where do you guys sit from last year? And so maybe if we could get some of that information, I know you probably don't have it at your fingertips here, but if we could get some of that information, that would be very helpful for me just to see overall where the schools are.
We can definitely supply that. The budget drivers, I mean, it gives you an indication of the budget impact, but you're right, it's not showing you actual budget. So we go over that stuff pretty regularly. We're running overall favorably to budget, but a lot of that is associated with well, let me just leave it at that. We are running we're running favorable. It's not a big margin, but we can definitely have Keith follow up with those details.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I would appreciate that.
This is Brad
Yeah,
Jackson.
go ahead, Brad.
Could I also add something to that, Mr. Shader?
Yes, go right ahead, Dr. Jackson. And by the way, it's
Thank
Dr.
you.
Shader to you.
Dr. Shader, pardon me.
Oh my God.
You can just call me Brad.
Yes.
The fuel oil and natural gas increases based not just on projected usage is based also on projected rates. So while if our usage is down this year, we basically don't. As you may remember, everybody, you could ask Keith for a 45-page spreadsheet on usage over the past 10 years, and you'd get more detail than you ever wanted. But we don't budget off of current year usage. We budget off of an average usage over the course of several years, and any increase we see is typically based on rate. So, which is based on usually futures at the time we do the budgeting. So the current usage does not drive an increase or a decrease in our expected costs in the subsequent fiscal year.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I'm going back on mute.
Okay.
The second question I had was just around the math tutor and reading tutor at Miller, and I did come to the session that you had at the high school 6 weeks back, and that was really helpful to hear the description of everything. I didn't get a sense during that meeting and was just hoping for some clarity around what's the true need for these tutors, and I guess what aren't the students getting from their current educators that they would need additional people to do these roles?
Brad, why don't you answer that in more detail than I've provided?
This is Brad Jackson. The need for tutors is basically as we continue to offer a more connected program student needs. We are finding that some students need the extra support that is beyond that, which and it's more in terms of time, not in terms of skill, that we're able to offer in the classroom environment. So we use a pull-out before, after school, and during available times during the school day, where we pull students out for additional support. We find that investing these monies at Miller is the critical place to get students back on track in terms of being on their the right grade level for reading and math skills, where it's much more expensive to make up those losses at the middle school level, where they've fallen behind if we don't catch up. So it's basically an investment earlier on in the process, when the students have been identified to need that extra push of skills and skill support to bring them back to grade level.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And that's not something that, so that's a during the day program. That's not an after school program?
It can be both.
Okay. One thing I was wondering is for the sub at the high school, do you have data in terms of how frequently teachers are absent? Because I was just wondering, it sounds like we need a full-time person. It sounds like people are out every single day. So I was just wondering, do you have sort of the data that backs up the need for the floater?
We do, but it's not, let me describe this differently. I think we've seen over the last couple of years a dramatic may not be the right word, but a meaningful increase in the number of, in the lack of substitutes, not so much an increase in teacher absences. Does that make sense? So what we're seeing is not that our teachers are gone more, but that we can't get the substitutes to backfill. And so that has resulted in the high school with a number of classes per day in the cafeteria. At any given point in time, it might be one or two, but we have had instances where students are in there multiple sessions in a row. We had, peak days, not a lot, where, you might have 5 or 6 classes in there. And if you can imagine, at one time, if you can imagine what it's like to have, basically 100 students in there at its worst, all at once, there's not a whole lot of learning going on. It's not quite enough to say, our best efforts. It's just the nature of the beast, right? So, our administrators are doing an incredible job trying to manage this, but without the staff and personnel to take them into individual classrooms where, they can kind of be more on top of student behaviors and provide support and at least sure they're focused on the lesson plan that's been left behind by the teacher, we're forced to put them in the cafeteria. And it's what other high schools are doing as well. It's just not a productive environment for our students in general. So we're trying to minimize the number of instances students are in that situation.
Okay. And so for 180 days, we have at least one teacher, if not up to 6, it sounds like, at the high school that are out during every day of the 180 days, it sounds like.
Well, I don't know if it's up to 6. I mean, I know there have been some days where, it like gets up to that, but and I don't know if it's every single day, but
no, of course not.
Probably not. I don't know if it's happening enough that it's a concern. Is that a fair way to say? Brad, do you want to add data behind that you have? I mean,
we average at least 3 teacher absences per day at the high school level, which is not abnormal, nor is it outside of other area schools. So I can't remember. Even on the first day of school, you have a teacher who is still recovering from something or has a cold or whatever. So perfect attendance is, while a goal is hardly a realistic expectation, and so there will be a staff absence at least every day.
Okay, thank you. For the Chromebooks, I was just wondering, have you thought more about going to a BYO at all?
No.
Okay. just asking, especially where we're looking at kindergarten, just to offset the other side of it.
Right. Well, Sue, I just want to add to that, the current environment excluded for a second here. One of the reasons we went to Chromebooks, there's a couple of reasons. One, the equity, ensuring every student has access to a device. Two, you can't, some do, some don't. But the second reason is that Chromebooks, again, give our teachers a much higher level of ability to sort of see and manage what their students are working on, if you will. So that's one of the reasons we're doing that. Now, does that mean a device that a student uses on their own can't work? It can work. We can't ensure that student isn't exposed to other things on that device. So that kind of goes out the window. We manage a very safe environment on the Chromebook, and so that's one of the reasons that we believe in that. Now, in the world we're in at this very moment, make exceptions, if you will.
Okay. And then my last question, and thank you for your patience with all these. For the Mood Check program that you were talking about, and I think you had said that it had been paid for by a grant, and then I missed the second. There's something else picked it up. I was wondering, it sounds like it's a program where they screen the students, which is probably established, and is the only benefit that we get is that we get access to the program, and then they notify the students, I'm presuming parents and guardians, and that's $60,000 per year. It seemed high just for notification and the access to the program. So I just wanted to get a little bit more insight if we're going to be picking that cost up. And then I guess the secondary question is there a possibility to get it picked up in other ways similar to what we've done in the past?
I'll let Brad elaborate, but I just want to say I cannot emphasize enough that when we talk about is the only benefit notification, that really sort of minimizes the importance of just that. In other words, if you had 100 students and you could find a way to identify in that 100 students 5 students who are vulnerable to depression and at risk for suicide, $60,000 looks a whole lot different. And that's what's good.
But I guess, have you looked into other programs that are less than that do the same thing?
No, there aren't other programs. That's the bottom line. In fact, Holliston was chosen as a pilot district by the Wellesley College Center for Women to pilot this initiative. We're one of the few districts. I think they may now be working with 1 or 2 other districts, but we're one of the few districts that was lucky enough to be able to participate with them in this program that was a pilot and is now, for us at least, ongoing. So there is nothing else like this out there, and that's the challenge. Brad, if you want to talk to other grants and things, that would be helpful.
This is Brad Jackson again. I can get you some more details on Mood Check. It is a depression and suicide screening tool that we give to all 7th, 9th, and 11th graders. We provide all the students who show a certain propensity toward, that's not the right word, towards depression, or show some concerns around self-harm, receive a face-to-face screening from a staff member from Wellesley Centers for Women, who is a licensed psychologist, who also does a face-to-face screening for that student. In addition, as part of the screening tool, students are asked if they would like to identify, or if they would like to talk to a counselor as they have a concern about another student, not just themselves, but someone else. And through that process, we have uncovered probably at least 5 to 10 students per year who were at a high risk of self-harm, who were not even on our radar. And each of those families receives access, and I'm going to get the name of the program wrong. It is out of, that college in Newton.
LaSalle.
No, it's
Joan. No,
it's not LaSalle. It's, but I'll get you the information. It's actually a reference tool for you to access direct supports if you don't want to go through Youth and Family Services, where you can find a resource in the community, a psychiatric resource in the community to support you if you don't, you or the child and and the family, if you don't want access these services through the schools or through Youth and Family Services.
Brad, this is Joan. Do you mind if I just extrapolate on that point just a little bit, because I think this is a really important benefit of this program.
Joan, please identify yourself again for the audio.
This is Joan Shaughnessy on the school committee.
Okay, continue.
Sorry to interrupt you, Brad, but this is an important part of it. Once you are screened, the representative from the Wellesley College for Women will call you, and you are connected to this network. Call this number. A social worker talks to you about your needs and why you're calling, and they connect you with therapists that are that accept your health insurance and are accepting patients, and they even take your calendar, and then they give you 3 references. Because when you have received notification that your child is at risk for suicide, the last thing you have the wherewithal to do is start to figure out what my insurance takes and how are they, and I'm going to call 25 therapists and get nowhere, and they're not going to call me back for a few days. This program negates all of that, and they do it very quickly, and they're professional and confidential and competent. And the other really important part about Mood Check is what Brad said. It's not just self-identifying, it's identifying kids that you are worried about. And it's confidential. So the kids have no reason to, make a joke or lie, or if you're truly worried about your friends and you're worried about going to a teacher or a parent, this is a really, really important outlet for kids to show concern for other kids, and they know more than parents a lot of times.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
You.
And either Brad or Joan, you might have mentioned a connection with Youth and Family Services, because they also were looking for some additional funding this year. Is there a connection with that through this program, or is that separate?
Not directly. This is Brad Jackson. Not directly. There's that's identified as an option for parents should they want to access it. But as Cynthia put in the notes through the group chat, the name of the referral service is through William James College. It's called Interface Referral Service, and actually that service is actually through this payment that we have been funding through the earmark funding through our Senate President, is actually available to any resident of Holliston and that interface referral service is available through the town website as well.
And the grant ran out. Is that why we have to now pick up the cost by the town?
Well, the grant, it's not a grant, it's earmarked through the state budget and is not guaranteed from year to year.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for your patience.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nursessian.
Thank you, Sue. And thank you, Joan and Brad, for elaborating. I really appreciate that.
Okay, Mr. Alfred?
Hi, yes, so it's Dan Alfred. First of all, I just wanted to start by saying and commending Brad and the entire administration on how they've handled the current difficult situation. It's been quite apparent with all the communication with the parents and, updated and measured emails that those were greatly appreciated, and at no point we sort of feel like, you didn't have a strong, handle on the situation, and we're in control. So I just want to, I do a lot of criticism from our side of the finance committee table. I think it's really important to recognize a good job when one is done.
It's a good team. Thank you, Dan.
Absolutely. So in contrast to some of my colleagues, I do want to sort of talk about the current economic and certain conditions that we're sort of in. And let me just first by saying we don't know anything really about about what is going to happen. Right? We know the next couple weeks, and my concern is actually in how much we don't know. Yet we have to sort of try to figure out a budget for really not even 18 months for a full 18 months. Not quite 18 months. You get the picture. So I've kind of gone back and I'm in finance, and so I'm looking in the markets, and then all economists are basically saying now that we will be in some sort of recession in the second quarter. It's debated whether we'll actually enter a recession technically in the first quarter or not, because we're sort of late enough into it. And then there's some debate on obviously how long this will last and whether we'll still be in recession in the third quarter. But sort of the last recession we had was the 08-09 recession, and I kind of went back and looked at the budgetary impact. So right now we're building into our sort of forecast about a $400,000 increase in overall state aid, not Chapter 70, but just total state aid to the town. Back in for the fiscal year 2010 budget, which was impact from 08-09, we took a $700,000 or approximately $700,000 drop in overall state aid. And so that would be like a $1.1 million delta if that ended up happening. Again, the only budget number we're going off of now is the governor's budget, which is a couple months old, which means it's actually completely thrown out the window as far as I'm concerned. In addition, local receipts dropped by about $200,000, and new growth fell by about $250,000. You're talking about over a $1.5 million potential sort of hit just from that, in addition to who knows what other kind of increased costs we may have. I mean, I know you guys are seeing some increased costs from this, and what I'm trying to. So, and Louise, if I could ask you the question, you mentioned something about the status of the contract negotiations, and if you just repeat that for me. Exactly what you
reached. Yeah, sure. This is Ann Louise. We reached a tentative agreement on Thursday evening, and frankly, we were encouraged because we were able to do this, this year, this time, since last time prior to town meeting, and in relatively short order, so that it would help inform our budget process. Those numbers are not specifically reflected in this budget request, but we're comfortable that within this request they can be accommodated. That's about all I can say right now. And then
no, I'm not asking for details. I just wanted you to go back. Yeah, no, I'm not asking for details. But you built in an assumption for about $1 million of increased sort of what was the word used in the presentation? I don't want to.
Budget drivers. It's on the screen right now. Fixed cost increases is $949,900.
No, but then if you go to the other one, which has the sped costs broken out. So you contract obligation and salary adjustments of $1.03 million. I think that before I would like the school committee just to consider before finalizing anything that we try to get some more. We try to wait as long as possible so that we have as much information. I have no idea right now how much we can afford. I don't know, and I would dare anybody in this room to tell me that they know how much we can afford for next year based upon where we stand. And I think that signing and ratifying something, when we have sort of control over whether we do that or not right now, in that context, is setting us up for potentially very negative consequences. And again, this could be a very doable number if everything, by April 7th we all go back to school and work and the economy, and because this 2-3 week period and warmer weather, the virus just dies and there are no more cases. Absolutely, that's a very rosy outlook. I don't believe that's in any chance likely. I'm personally a much longer sort of duration on that side, but that's sort of beside the point, because really what my point is that no one knows. I can't tell you what the impact is going to be. So my concern right now is that we have the very largest contract within the town with the biggest budgetary impact, and we have a decision right now over whether we actually seal it in the midst of all this turmoil, or we just sort of say, hold on a second. We negotiated in good faith with you over the last few months, but things have changed, and had they changed quickly. And no one could have seen this exactly playing out how it has, but needless to say, we are where we are.
So, Dan Louise again.
Excuse me. Can
I just say one thing? Could I just finish my comment just quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to be clear. We're not asking for a vote tonight. This was a presentation to provide information on what the committee approved on February 26th and the rationale behind all of that. And I think certainly that information is relevant and important to consider. I don't think anyone's going to challenge you on the question of where the economy is going. We don't know. That's clear, but I'm not sure that's pertinent at this very moment, because our goal tonight was simply to present this information and share it.
No, I understand that, but I'm reacting to the fact that you just said that you have a sort of agreement in principle, and all I'm saying is that you've heard me. It's not a signed agreement. Yeah. I think that to sign something in it. I'm not saying change anything. I'm not saying try to ask to go back to the negotiating. I'm just saying just pause. That's all I'm saying. So I know that the point of the presentation was tonight, but what I'm concerned about is that if this number that you put in the budget drivers, this $1 million number that you put in the budget drivers sticks, and then we get hit with $1.5 to $2 million of issues, and we do have other places where we can sort of maybe find some money for some periods of time, use some emergency type funds, but I'm not sure that there won't be other costs that we'll also have that are going to come along the way that we're going to have to use money for. And how deep do we dig? How much of a hole? Who else in town? I mean, it's just, let's just be very careful about things that we can control now, knowing that we don't know.
Okay, I'm sorry, Dr. Jackson.
Yes, Brad, go ahead.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and as I said, just to clarify, right, we're not talking about the contract because we shouldn't be talking about the contract, or the agreement in principle, I say, because it's not a contract yet. I think that Mr. Alfred's point is only that you might want to consider when to seal the deal. But that's your purview. But that's his. That's the.
I don't know
the thought that he's.
I don't know anything about the contract. This is the first I've heard of it tonight.
Correct.
All I'm saying is, let's not shoot ourselves in the foot if we can avoid it.
Okay. Do you have any other questions, Dan?
No, I mean, look, I mean, I am frustrated every year by the fact that you guys come to us. You bring up a lot of very important things that I think would benefit the students greatly. The screening program we just discussed for a long time, I'm fully on board with. Tuition-free full-day kindergarten, all these type of things. It frustrates me year after year that we're not able to do as much incremental positive because we do have those contractual obligations that continue to sort of, really sort of, in my view, hinder our ability to provide the best services to our students.
Okay.
So hopefully we have the money to fund a lot of these things that you've asked for, but I don't, I'm not optimistic at the moment, personally.
Dr. Shada?
Yep, go ahead, Dr. Jackson.
With all due respect, I think those contractual obligations are the reason why we are able to serve our students high quality we currently do. And I do respect your point of view regarding growth, but in my view, as the professional educator who's trying to lead this school district, we have to acknowledge the good work that is done and ensure that our staff is paid a fair and equitable wage against the market. And I'm not saying this as a prelude to be going back and forth. I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that we're building on a strong base, and that's a strong base that's made possible by an extraordinary staff of educators who are serving our students currently. I'm going to mute now.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Jackson. I fully comprehend that. But as was just mentioned, if that $60,000 screening saves 3 or 4 kids or even one child, and we're not able to fund it because of the contractual obligations, I think that's kind of
right. Okay. The point.
A little bit.
The point's been made, Mr. Alford. Let's move on.
I'm going to mute my phone now.
Okay, you're done. Okay, Mr. Murphy.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, Vincent Murphy from the Finance Committee. So, thank you guys for doing all this work and presenting this. I want to just get to the point. If we can start with the FY21 budget drivers, I'm going to go through and ask a couple of questions from that sheet. The contractual obligations and salary, can you tell me which of the bargaining units and which admin versus principals make up the $1 million? What's driving the biggest thing? We go through like top to bottom, percentage-wise. What were the biggest increases?
Unit? Well, I mean, clearly the teachers are the biggest group in there, if that's what you're asking.
From a gross dollar standpoint, but were they the biggest percentage-wise?
Well, because they're the biggest group and the largest number of FTEs by order of magnitude, the answer to that is yes. Brad, would you answer that differently?
That is an aggregate number for all of the contractual obligations to all staff in the Holliston Public Schools.
Question, though, I'm asking is what's the biggest driver? What's getting to the 2.95%? Is it across the board everybody's getting a 2.95%, or was it giving bargaining unit A versus bargaining unit B of 5% versus a 1%? I'm just trying to get what's in the drivers there.
There's 2 things. That's not a 2.9. That is contributing. So that's 2.95% of the total increase. So in other words, that number, $1 million, is driving the budget up 2.95%. It doesn't. It's not necessarily. Okay. It has to do with what staff are getting. We are not breaking down that number by we're not providing any more details on that number in public session because to do so could potentially expose contract negotiation strategies in public.
Okay. The next line item, the fuel and oil and natural gas, is, as you know, everything's taken a tumble, including all the price wars, and who knows what it's going to be, like Dan mentioned. Would you be willing to entertain looking at that number again and maybe pushing it downwards?
I'll circle back with Keith and see if we can get some, particularly, basically we try to tie our numbers down with by purchasing futures, not directly, but through our vendor. So
yep.
We'll take a look at the futures market and see, particularly in the fuel oil, if we can take advantage of that. I'll take that as an action item.
Okay, great. Well, next thing I noticed was long-term disability insurance. I thought you didn't have any benefits, so why is this here, and what's the driver of increasing it to $21,000?
That's a contractual obligation, not an obligation. That's a independent insurance offering that is provided to members of several bargaining units dating back decades. It is being driven, increased based on, it's essentially a self-insurance model. So in the past 2 years, we've had 2 cases that have caused insurance carrier to adjust our rates up significantly.
So are these people, is it kind of like grandfathered in, did you say? And so once they start retiring, we're going to get rid of this plan?
No, it's still it's a at this point in time, at this moment in time, it's a benefit offered to several collective bargaining units, and unless and until it's bargained out of the collective bargaining unit contract, it's an obligation to provide that. We'll still have that obligation to provide that insurance coverage.
Okay. The next question is regarding, hold on. Why did Dr. Jackson not want to have full-day kindergarten versus the school committee? What was the thought process there?
I got tired of getting my head handed to me for increases that we couldn't afford.
I want to say this. It isn't that Dr. Jackson doesn't want it. He has asked for it almost every year. I think except one exceptional year for as long as I can remember. But we've never been able to manage it. Every year we face Sophie's choice between this one big nut of like kindergarten or a number of other desperately needed positions. And what inevitably happens is that within the context of what we think the town can afford, what the finance committee is able to support, if you will, the numbers just don't add up. And so we end up leaning toward the other positions or programs, if you will, because it's hard to swallow just doing full-day kindergarten, but that was a very healthy conversation that the committee had, and some of the committee members felt like that might even be a route to go, is just do full-day kindergarten. So honestly, it's just a really tough call to make, and I think Dr. Jackson, Speak Up Red, is very much in support of this. He didn't add it in because there's so much else there. That's it.
Okay. The next question I have is just regarding the mood thing class or whatever it's called. The
Food check.
Your still assumption could be that we could get money from the state for this. Correct? I heard that it's the budget. Is it, or is it not included in this year's budget? Or so if we offer and we approve this budget and it comes down that state gives a grant, what's going to happen to this line item?
Brad? I don't know what happened there, but look, between now and town meeting, it was our intent to continue to try to identify potential resources for this. It's not easy. We weren't optimistic that would potentially come through, and I think I'm even less optimistic, obviously, right now. So that is, I didn't mean to mislead you with any reference to any other potential resources, if that's what I did.
Okay. The other question I had, it's adding staff, was why are we adding maintenance specialists and the custodians? What is not getting done that you need to have this, and why 2 FTEs?
Keith, are you on the phone?
Apparently you don't read the Holliston Reporter, Vince.
Thank you, Joan. No, I do read it. It's just I'm asking the question. It's got to be on the record.
It's a fair question to ask.
Yes, I'm here, Ann Louise. I've been trying to be respectful. So it's Keith Boudet, this manager. Then basically, as our buildings age, there are more needs for maintenance in general. And this would only put us back to a level we were, probably 10 to 12, maybe 15 years ago. And that level is still down another member from when I started here 19 years ago. So that's the piece of the maintenance piece. The custodial piece, we used to have one custodian, one of our own employed custodians in each building. That through budget cuts, that got reduced down to one custodian for the entire district. And doing some of the less technically competent, simple maintenance type things, or some of the more mundane type things about cleaning up around the buildings, doing maybe some trimming of hedges outside, or things of that nature. We just can't get to it. It's just, again, too much work, not enough bodies.
Okay, can you talk to the differences between a maintenance and a custodial individual, and some of the, just like a couple of examples, because I don't think it's well understood, and how you would use them differently?
Sure, that's not a problem. A custodian, I'll start with a custodian. A custodian is a lower skilled person. So some of the types of duties that they would do would be literally opening a building. So in the morning they would come in, open the front doors, turn lights on, open doors for teachers. If the teachers don't have the keys, it depends on which school, on whether that happens or not. They would go around, make sure that everything was taken care of with regards to that some immediate mess didn't occur, that we didn't have a child have an upset stomach and maybe leave a deposit behind. Things of that type of nature. We do have, from our contracted cleaning company, we do have day porters, but their coverage is not universal with regards to time frames. We have them for our heavier times, which is around the lunchtime, which obviously there are many more things to clean up during lunch when you have, 200 children per grade eating lunch in your cafeterias. So in addition to those types of duties, what we would be doing is tasking them to do some smaller tasks, maybe painting a piece of a hallway, maybe going outside and picking up trash to clean up, for that piece. So it's those types of things. And then in the summers, we do a tremendous amount of cleaning with regards to cleaning. We clean out each of our unit ventilators, we blow them out, we lube them, we replace belts. So that type of thing, they play a smaller role in. And that goes in conjunction with the maintenance mechanic, which does do all of our real PM work. So again, in that unit ventilator, the maintenance mechanic is the one who's going in and checking the belt, replacing the belts, lubing the unit ventilator itself, doing rooftop unit work at times, doing small roof patching, working on the boilers. Doing bigger assemblies of equipment we may have. It's that type of thing. A maintenance mechanic is a skilled mechanic. One of our maintenance mechanics is a licensed electrician, for example. For a short time, 18, 19 years ago, we had a maintenance mechanic that was a plumber. But it's that sort of thing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Boudet. And by the way, your son appreciates you blowing his eardrums out with the volume of your phone. So.
Well, we have a better connection.
Okay, and I will remind everybody, especially Ms. Shaughnessy, Please do not interject. You can raise your hand on the video part if you wish to speak, and I will acknowledge that. So, okay, Mr.
Okay.
Murphy, continue.
Thank you. Just have a question regarding, as we're looking at finance and operation initiatives, what was the thought process, and I guess between Brad and also Keith, of getting rid of the replacement windows in the library, cafeteria, and science wing? I'm just thinking from a heat standpoint and other utilities, we could save money if we had that. Not to say we have money, but just to say, why are we not including what was the logic behind that? And the second question I'll ask is regarding the roof repairs. How old is the roof at Miller? And what's the state of repair as it right now?
I'll answer part of that, Keith, if you want to do the roof piece, or be prepared to do the roof piece in a minute. The window piece is still remains linked to the overall effort on the school committee's part to engage with the Mass School Building Authority to have a wholesale feasibility study conducted in partnership with the MSBA on the future of Holliston High School. And the logic that I bring forward is that while that process is ongoing, we do have to invest in the school to make sure that things that are no longer functional, such as the field turf at Comedian, that we maintain our school. While I am not a big fan of those windows, I consider that to be an improvement, and I think it's unwise to do an improvement on a school that you don't have a long-term plan for yet. So it's more a matter of timing. So that's the issue on my logic around the windows. Keith, can you answer the question on the age of the roof at Miller?
Yes, I can. Is this a better volume? I'm hoping.
Hey, it's fine. It's fine with me. It's just it's your son. You woke him up when you were speaking before. So.
Carefully getting paid for this. So
Right.
the roof at Placentino Miller, the section that is in trouble right now is the pitch section. It's not the flat roof section, so it's the shingled section that's over the cafetorium space. Again, it's getting soft. And the recommendation from a person we do a lot of roofing with is that it needs to be replaced. The age of it was put into service in 1998, so we're talking about 22 years old. If we could get it to 25 years, at that point we could look at an accelerated repair on it, but roofs have to be 25 years old for an accelerated repair through MSBA. So again, that's the piece of it. We're holding it together as well as we can. I do have a quote that was a non-prevailing wage quote, so I had to push it up a little bit to get to the 125,000. I would still, obviously, it's going to be a formal bid process, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't, again, the number's a real number. We just have to, do some more work on it if this was viewed favorably.
Thank you. I guess the next question is regarding the field. How old is that? And I know, didn't we buy a machine to help maintain it a few years back? And am I correct? Not.
No, you actually turned down that request.
Okay.
The field was put into service. Brad's been here 16 years, so 15 years ago. And again, these fields in general, they look for you to replace them at about 10 years. Maybe you can stretch it a little, 10, 11, maybe 12. We've gotten it to 15 now, and it's time.
Yeah, and I will just clarify for the record, Mr. Murphy and Mr. Boudet, that the machine was turned down because we suggested you go the contractual maintenance route, which is what you did.
Correct, and we actually, I don't say over-service it, but we do the highest level of service twice a year, where I don't recommend it, but they didn't suggest that, that's a better word. They didn't suggest that we do it that high, but I really wanted to get the maximum value, the maximum number of years out of this field.
Correct. I just wanted to point out that we didn't turn down the machine and tell you to let the field go to waste. We we took a different approach. So anyway.
But you didn't fund that either, truthfully.
Correct.
So
That is correct. We do. But okay, Mr. Murphy.
Could I just
Yep. Go ahead, Dr. Jackson.
This is Brad Jackson again. Just so everybody's working off the same page. This was also brought forward last year, and we either the school committee or the school committee and the finance committee, and don't quote me because I can't remember which, but we made a joint decision, or at least the finance committee was informed that we were going to be deferring this request because we were putting in the request for the feasibility study with the MSBA for the first time, and we wanted to see how, if that, on the outside chance, that was going to be accepted in the first year, with the understanding that if it wasn't accepted in the first year, this project would return as it has. So this piece should not be a surprise to anyone. I think that was clearly communicated to all parties that was the plan, at least of the administration and the school committee.
Yes, and this was on the capital plan, Mr. Murphy, just to be clear.
Thank you. I'm sorry if we bump back to district-wide technology initiatives. The file servers, are you in the cloud, or are these servers actually resting somewhere in one of the buildings?
This is Pat Jackson. I can't answer. We are primarily in the cloud. We do have several local servers that we still maintain, and I can't provide you any more level of specificity. And if Keith can't, then I can get you that information via email.
Yeah, my question is, if in this day and age, why do we need file servers if we're, less and less people actually have them? Unless there's something secure we need to have it on. But
this is Anne Louise, and I actually do think some of our student information is there. I could be wrong, but I think that is part of it, and there's backup servers as well. So I completely understand where you're coming from on that, Vin, and we can get you the detail, but I do think there's some security related to student information. Could be wrong, but we'll check on that for you.
Vin, it's Keith Boudet. Actually, we've eliminated, this process is going to eliminate, I believe it's 4 of our 7 servers. And so we do still have a number of file servers with a lot of legacy files on them. They're actually data servers that we're in the process of transitioning off of, and that's our goal moving forward. We also have our software for our lunch program there. We have not migrated to their services yet in the cloud because it was cost prohibitive, and we were going to lose some. It was cost prohibitive because we had to do other changes internally to get us up another version, et cetera, of the software. So that again is another piece that's coming. Right, this changeover for the servers is based around we're out of we've reached end of life with regards to our server software, and we need to move into a more secure environment because there's no more updates for them. So.
Okay, that's it from me, Ken.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Murphy. Ms. Zemer, are you online and ready?
Could you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I had made this huge long list, and there's one thing left on the list, and then I wanted to circle back around to something. So I think it was on slide number 17. Is that it? Could you go to? There was one thing that I saw on it, and you didn't mention it, and I didn't know what it was. There was something like transportation support specialist, but then you.
Are you talking about? Can you tell me the headline on the slide, because I feel like there's a number difference on the slide.
It was one of the initiatives, and it was on the bottom, and then you went to the next slide without. There it is. Transportation support specialist. I mean, it was only I don't mean only $8,000, but you didn't mention it, and I didn't know if there was a reason, like, because then you went to the next slide without mentioning it.
No, I did mention it. What I was saying is that Well, you know what? I did describe it, but I'll ask Keith to elaborate. Keith, maybe you can describe this position again.
Yes, Keith Boudet here. Basically, Michelle, what the situation is we've had a lot more complexity built into our out-of-district transportation for our special needs students that's required a lot more internal care from existing staff. So what this would be is an expansion, but not to a benefits-eligible position. This is an expansion of our current transportation coordinator into a more regular position, something that would be showing up daily as opposed to in larger chunks. Our current transportation coordinator shows up in larger chunks of time to manage the big yellow bus portion of the day. This is more to add to that to be able to pick up this piece of it.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then if you can go to the slide of assumptions. I'm circling back to something Dan said. Okay. Yes. Was this it?
Are you going to talk about the?
Well, there was something about state aid. Is it on another?
No. It's all here, but I think I referenced, potential changes.
I just wanted to discuss something that Dan had said, and then Brad commented about the teachers, and I just want to say that talking about the teachers, I don't want to talk about negotiations or anything that we shouldn't be discussing, but discussing possible, I don't know how to put this delicately, we're not discussing the value of teachers or anything like that when we discuss the budget and possible needs for restraint in spending. It has nothing to do with the value of teachers or the worth of education or anything like that. Just the reality of the economy and the possibility of less state aid than we're anticipating. That's the only thing that we're discussing. And I just want to make that clear, that it's just the reality of the situation now. People aren't out spending money. The income tax, if people aren't working, the state isn't getting the income tax revenue. People aren't spending money. The sales tax isn't coming in. The state aid isn't going to be there at levels we had anticipated, and that's just the reality of the situation. And I just wanted to make that clear. It's not a value judgment on education. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Zemer. Mr. Murphy, I think you had a follow-up question?
I did. Thank you, Ken. This is Vin Murphy. I just had a question for Keith based on the transportation coordinator. Can you elaborate? Are we talking about adding hours? Who's doing it now, and how many hours are they working? And is this $8,000 kind of like an additional wage, or are they going to be increasing hours? I wasn't clear by your answer.
Again, Keith Boudet here. Yes, it is adding hours to an existing position. The position is filled by a retiree right now, and we would be replacing that retiree with a new person to work those additional hours. My expectation is the number of hours per week would probably add up to about a 0.33 FTE.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I just want to add a couple of questions, but most of what I wrote down has already been answered, so I don't have that much to discuss. But what I would like to ask about you, Anne Louise, you mentioned that you sent us information about benefits eligibility. I haven't looked through everything yet, so I just want to confirm that, because I had written in several of these positions, I'd written down, are these benefit positions, are they going to become benefit eligible positions? So you said that data is elsewhere in what you sent us? Anne Louise?
Sorry, I was on mute and I was having a nice conversation with myself. Yes, I did send along. I'm just gonna. I'm not
Okay.
gonna go
I mean,
through
I just want to make sure the
and
data is
look,
there.
but-
As I said, we don't need to hold up because of it. Just that I hadn't looked through it, all of it, and I just wanted to confirm that you had data on which positions would have benefit implications.
Yeah, so it looks. Hang on a sec. Let me show you. So you got a spreadsheet that looks like this, and there's a column here that says whether or not there is a benefit impact. And in the actual spreadsheet, I haven't considered on here. I have another column here that, indicates the ones that we, are recommending that, well, it's budget subcommittee, but that the school committee is recommending what that impact looks like. And I just need the average cost to calculate it, but it's over here on the right. So, but you can see immediately which are impacted or not.
Okay. I mean, what you're actually showing on the video is a warped version of your screen right now, but that.
Excellent. I'm
yes.
sorry. It looks really nice on mine. It's
Yeah.
the PDF of the spreadsheet.
That's okay. That's okay. As I said, I just wanted to confirm that the data was there. The other question I had was related to the discussion about the teacher and admin support devices. Mr. Sparrow mentioned something about that. Is that on our capital spreadsheet? That's the first question.
Forgive me, which one?
The 244,000 capital.
Okay, so I did want to offer a comment on that. Last version of this has been an ongoing challenge, trying to, frankly, as a town, get the spreadsheet updated. And the last version that we received was just after the ratings call, not just after, it was a few days after. So at that point in time, I don't know what master version you all were working off of to prepare for the ratings call, but the version we've been maintaining at the school has been keeping up to date. And there has been no collective or collaborative meeting where we've been sort of merged stuff. I know he's trying to get it into the version that is now online, but we have been maintaining that. So if there's a discrepancy or a few discrepancies, it doesn't mean that we're not putting it in there. It just means that we now have to get it into the version that you all were using for the CI, for the ratings call, which is online. And quite honestly, with everything that's been going on, that just doesn't happen before this meeting. And so apologies for that, but they would do it. Is that an accurate assessment, Keith?
It took me. I found out after the fact that you had hid the tab that we had. I didn't know that when I originally got it, and then eventually I found it and started to update it. And then obviously with a lot of the things that have been going on, whether it be budget or negotiations or now our COVID, I'm just behind on it. That one is not in there. I did make some changes. If you do look at it, I've made some adjustments on there. So for existing projects, future projects, for projects that were cut, which I added back in. So.
And again, I just want to be really clear. Keep maintaining this on our end with the version that we've had, but reconciling and re-inputting that data now to the version that's online is the exercise that we're doing, which is why it really needed to be online all along. So that's discrepancy, the rationale for why there's a discrepancy. Back to your question.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure it gets on there. That's the bigger issue.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing was, is there a specific reason why we're doing all at once? And this kind of, again, Ben alluded to this, why we're doing this all at once as opposed to treating it in the same way we treat the Chromebooks, where if there's a 5-year life for this technology or whatever, that we do a 5-year, a 1/5 of it a year type of thing, rather than hitting it for $244,000 all at once.
Brad, can you speak to that? Because I did not go into that level of detail with him when this came up.
This is Brad Jackson. As I mentioned, this project was, we would prefer to replace them in a periodic way, as opposed to in one fell swoop. But we also delayed replacement for 2 years while we finalized our student replacement strategy, which is basically the cascade charts that we've had now, that we're now working off of. And during that time, the equipment that is in the hands of our staff has gotten to the point now where we believe wholesale replacement is necessary.
Okay. Well, all I would comment on that is, the committee will obviously have to discuss the expense, but should we move forward with a wholesale replacement, the expectation from certainly me would be that going forward, this is a multi-year replacement, that this replacement after year 3, you'd start replacing some machines, and then that would stretch it out into a regular replacement cycle as opposed to coming to us 5 years from now with another big hit. That's just my opinion. So, okay.
I agree.
Okay. The other thing is, and I always just ask this just more for an administrative point of view, with regards to the file servers, I presume and just want to confirm that when we're doing things like technology, like file servers, that there's some level of coordination between a town's technology director and the director of technology over at the schools to make sure that we're leveraging whatever joint expertise or purchasing capabilities that we have?
We are. And without belaboring an issue in public session, I think the bigger issue we're faced here is a software versions of our current servers that are now unupgradable, that present us with some challenges moving forward pretty quickly.
Okay.
I can
Yeah,
probably
no, I
elaborate.
can guess what you're thinking there, Dr. Jackson.
I can elaborate on that in a more private setting.
Yep. Okay. With regards to the, and this is probably a question for Mr. Boudet, with regards to the maintenance and custodian additions, as you know, we just hired a facilities manager for the town. We understand the relationship between, it's not taking over the schools, but all that discussion has happened. But in my mind, there should be some coordination here, because if we're going to have a facilities manager that ultimately is going to be overseeing town buildings, whether or not it includes the schools is still an issue, but the long-term plan is that it somehow does that we at least coordinate on some of this, where it's not like you get approval of the facilities manager by any means, that's not their purview, but that there's some kind of coordination taking place to understand the positions that are being hired and how that might fit into an overall maintenance strategy going forward. So I guess it's more of a comment than a question, but go ahead.
I was waiting for the question.
Yeah.
I understand your comment.
Okay. And while another one for you, Keith, with regards to the Miller roof repairs, you put it in, it's in the presentation as Miller roof repairs. When you spoke about it earlier, you basically said it's replacing one roof, not the flat roof, the pitch roof. I just wanted to be clear on that. Is this a replacement of a roof, or is this repairing the roof so that it's going to need replacement? I'm just trying to figure out what does that do to life. If it's a repair, I wanted to know how much longer it keeps the roof from being replaced, and if it's a replacement, then obviously that question is moot.
Moot. It's a repair that's replacing it.
Okay, so it really should say replacement of that section of the roof. Okay, because obviously I don't want to do a repair that's not going to give us some extra life. So
again, the expectation I think is that we'd be looking at another 20 to 30 years on the roof.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
But again, that's that section, the pitched roof, for the cafetorium area.
Correct. I understand it's not the whole flat roof and everything like that. But okay, the other thing, and this is more for Anne Louise. One thing that I would like to see with regards to the staffing additions is the net staffing change that's expected, right? Because we see these presentations every year where it says, hey, we want to add, 0.5 FTE here, and maybe that's elsewhere in the documentation you sent. But one thing that we never hear about are where we've lost positions. And then again, I'm not saying through layoffs, I'm talking about retirements, things like that, where some of these, because I think it's important to understand what the actual, body count growth is, so to speak, at the schools. Are we going to be adding, 5 bodies total? Are we adding only 2 net of the, 3 or 4 people that are leaving, that kind of thing? So that's just a comment. I'd like to see that information. Again, you don't have to give it to me now, but that's something I'd like to understand.
Let me just a couple thoughts. First is that I think we're happy to provide you any information. The challenge is that we don't always know that until well after the budget process is complete, because some of those, typically those changes come through retirement, which happens sometimes close to the end of the year, and other times we'll have resignations over the summer. You know what I'm saying? Not a lot, but I think more importantly, by and large, we are replacing staff. So while we end up with often adjusted salaries typically lower, we aren't necessarily getting a gain on the FTE with the impact. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, well, that's exactly why I'm asking the question, right? And I'm not just, to be honest with you, I'm not just talking about, teachers. I'm talking about across the entire district, right? There's a certain employee base, right? And that, and so I'm just saying, one thing.
Are you asking about salary favorability or the impact on benefits?
Actually, a little bit of both. I'm just saying that it's one thing that is not clear to me when I see these presentations is how many additional net staff will we end up with at the schools next year? Okay, and I understand you don't know all the details at this moment, but it is important to understand if we're adding staff every year when we see these additions, right? That has an impact not just on the benefit side in terms of immediate benefits, but that has impact on the OPEB side. And if you look at our last actuarial report, for example, that we had on the OPEB liability, that specifically noted that our liability had increased primarily due to increased employee count at the schools, that there was a larger increase in the number of employees at the schools. So that just kind of alerted me, we should be paying closer attention, not for the FinCom to decide to hire and fire. I'm just talking about we should be keeping an eye on what is the total body count over at the schools, because that has an implication to our benefit liability.
Yeah, well, that's no problem. We can certainly provide you with a time estimate of that, and I think it's safe to assume that if we had to do it right now, it would be whatever our FTE count is, plus the positions we're asking for, if you will, on an overall count. But we can have Keith follow up with you and give you some detail.
Right, and the other thing I'll point out is you could also go back in time. In other words, yes, you may not know for this particular presentation what is the net gain going to be next year, right? But you could go back and, for example, you could say last year we asked for, X FTE and we funded this many, but our overall count now for FY20, we know the number because all the resignations occurred last, in June, right? Things like that, or retirements, whatever, right? So you can give the history is my point, even if you can't give the final number for now because you don't know yet.
Okay. So the only thing I'm going to ask you, because I know that the entire administrative staff is swamped, I completely understand the request, but I'm going to ask you if you can make this one a little bit lower priority until they're able to get through all that they're dealing with coronavirus.
Nope, right, I'm fine with that. I just want to put it out there that's data.
There's because there's a lot of analysis, not a lot, but there's some analysis and reports to be done in that. I just want to buy them some time so you can just hang tight with and try to pull something together in the coming weeks.
Okay, and the last thing I had that hadn't been covered already was one follow-up for Keith on the roof. Did we have the entire roof checked? In other words, do we know that this one roof that's being asked for is is the one that's in desperate need, and do we have like 3 more that we're going to hear about in the next year? Like, do we know what the status is of the rest of the roofing on the schools?
Gotcha.
Yeah, again, this is Keith Boudet.
Pretty much everybody shares my sentiment. We don't have enough money for it.
Yep, somebody needs to mute.
Somebody mute.
Oh, you didn't hear my answer right? Ed, I'm sorry, I only give it one. Yes, I mean, we had, oh gosh, what's it, about a year and a half ago, we had the infrared study of all the flat sections of the roof that we did, and we made a number of patches based on that. We obviously regularly check the roofs, and we get those alerts when it rains, when, we do find sections that are not or are having a problem. This is a critical need here, but the Placentino Miller plant, again, the building opened in 1998. It's going to come due sooner as opposed to later. I think the goal for us is to try to get us to that 25th year so that we can look at the accelerated repair program for the roof to get state support in it. But yes, more is coming. I just can't quantify when. This area is much more critical. I'm not going to say it's falling in or anything like that, because that's not the case. But again, we're managing leaks over there that we are struggling with. And truthfully, some of the sheathing underneath, when it gets soft, it doesn't hold the roofing nails, and we do have, we're like using an epoxy to hold the roof shingles in place.
Okay, so with regards to that particular roof, you mentioned that there were issues with it, but was the whole thing inspected and to make sure that all the issues that are potentially there were identified?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to double check. Okay, well, that's all I had, and we're going obviously very long because of the process we're using. So what I would suggest, given that we're already 2.5 hours in, is Anne-Louise, I know you had the second presentation, and I'd like you to go through that, but I'd like you to make it very quick. Just give us an update on what might be coming down or what the financial challenges are related to our emergency response, and we'll go from there. So. Anne-Louise? You still on mute, Anne-Louise?
Yes, sorry. Thank you. The presentation is short, and I'm going to ask Brad to do it still. Okay. I want to pass sharing to him. It really covers 3 areas of concern that he highlighted in a memo to us, and we think, this is changing by the minute, and yes. I asked Brad yesterday to draft a memo on this. The committee, this is not an approved request, it's an update, and we may modify and turn it into approved request when we meet as a committee on Thursday night. But in the interest of expediency and giving you visibility into costs that are coming down the pike, for the town, this is certainly one area, and we just wanted you to have that information on hand so that as you evaluate emergency funding across the board, you know what potential needs are.
Right,
and with just that, Brad,
yes. Yeah? Before you get started, Brad, I just want to say one thing, which is, as you said, this situation is very dynamic, and we have to, as a finance committee, we have to figure out what our mechanisms are for dealing with these expenses. So that's why I want to keep this to just give us treat it as you said, as an update. Just tell us where things are, what might be coming, and then we have our job to go and figure out what we can do under the state of emergency. So.
Okay, and
Brad, can you take the baton and present from your computer? Do you want me to just pull it up and tell me to flip? What do you want to do?
If you could pull it up, Anne-Louise, that would be helpful, because I'm not prepared to do that. I wanted to give you a brief update, and what I'm going to call this right now is a worst-case scenario. These numbers are actually worse than I shared with the school committee yesterday because of some information that came to me today, but it could get better tomorrow. So I wanted to know the 3 caveats are basically, I don't know.
Yep, we get that.
So on the next slide, Anne-Louise, if we could just, there's 3 things I'm worried about. Right now, I'm planning for the continuity of learning efforts. That is my number 1 priority. I think it is hubris to believe that we will be returning to school April 6th, but we are actually starting to begin the planning process for something longer. And then my biggest concern is paying for a subset of hourly staff, and I'll explain that real quickly. And then the third is food service losses. So in terms of continuity of learning efforts, on the next slide, we are very well equipped at the high school in Adams because we're a one-to-one Chromebook place, but our third, fourth, and fifth graders, we only have a 2-to-1 capability. Luckily, we received a donation of 50 devices last year, and a pledge for another 50 devices just the other day from a local charity. But I also came to learn that those 100 devices need to have some serious upgrades, as the internal Chrome software is like at version 40 and the current version's at 110. So we still have to do some work to get those field ready. So we are, at this point in time, I need, because of some of the devices that I mentioned when we talked about replacement that are no longer worthy, I need to have devices in the hands of all of my staff. And so we estimate we need 25 more devices. I can handle getting devices to all the grades 3, 4, and 5 by redeploying spares and devices from 2 Chromebook carts and the 100 devices once I get them upgraded. The other thing that's new to the school committee that I didn't share in my memo yesterday, we had a long conversation as an administrative team today. I'm starting out the day with a conference call with my senior administrative team and ending my day, so it's a very fluid situation. Today we started to pay attention to how we're going to use paraprofessionals during the time when school is closed, and we found that we have quite a number of paraprofessionals that we don't provide them with any device at work. If we are going to want them to work from home and access student work through Google Classroom and work with students in tutorials and support, we're estimating, and this is a worst case scenario, that we may need up to 50 devices for them. And all of our Chromebooks need to have Chromebook management software on it. So that's for the 75 new units, if I could get them. And I have to tell you, even if you gave me this money today, I don't know what lead times are on these because, of all the imports from China that are being held or not coming forth. So I haven't had a chance to look into that. All of our Chromebook units need Chromebook management software, which is $30 a unit. So that's about $21,750. So that's again worst case scenario, and but kind of reflects my current thinking. In terms of the next priority, this is actually something that I am going to be talking to the school committee in more detail in executive session about, because some of these issues are related to collective bargaining units that do have hourly staff. But at this point in time, it is my recommendation that we continue to pay all of our hourly staff that are budgeted through our operating budget. I make this recommendation for 2 reasons. First of all, because I can find useful work for them. And second of all, because if we don't pay them, they're going to be eligible for unemployment benefits. And since we're all self-insured for unemployment, and unemployment benefits are available immediately, we're going to pay for this out of one line item or another. So if we have them budgeted, it is going to be my recommendation to the school committee that we continue to pay for all of our hourly employees who are currently funded by the budget. There are 2 exceptions to that. One is the cafeteria workers, our current budgeted extended day staff who are not funded by the budget. They're funded through revolving accounts, which have revenues associated with them that are now starting to dry up because obviously people aren't buying lunches and we're not charging tuition for extended day. During the 3-week closure period, that's almost $66,000 of hourly staff, mostly in the extended day program. And so I'm just alerting you to this at this point in time. Food service people are actually working right now. They're the ones who are staffing much of the lunch support that we're giving to the community in terms of drive-through lunch pickup for families in need that begins tomorrow that people can pick up at Miller or have delivered. So this is, again, just a kind of worst-case scenario, not this one I'm worried about, so it's something we have to give some consideration to on a fairly quick basis, and something that I'll be talking to the school committee about Thursday night. Next slide is the final piece, which is we are, as I mentioned, we are funding, again, at this point in time, you don't wait to make some of these decisions. Some people say I'm happiest when I'm in charge, and I've been making a lot of decisions this past week because somebody's got to, and one of them is to provide some support to families who are in need, primarily those families who qualify for free and reduced lunch through the Holliston Public Schools. We will not qualify for federal aid right now in its current form because they are only pledged federal aid for communities that have greater than 50% of their students participating in free and reduced lunch. So this is about a $3,800 exposure as well. So the total, basically, worst case scenario, we also lost some food, and we also need about $3,000 for of materials to put the lunches together. Thanks, St. Louis. Now, the summary is basically somewhere worst case scenario of $91,000. So that's basically where we are at this point in time. I just wanted to kind of provide that to people as a just a starting point of where my thinking currently stands.
So before we go to questions, this is Anne-Louise. I just want to add one thing to Dr. Gaston's presentation, or emphasize it. 2 of these costs are at the moment time limited. The hourly employee estimate and the food service losses that we're showing here are associated only with the 3-week closing. And if that gets extended, these costs are variable. They will increase. The Chromebook and software estimate is a fixed cost that will allow us to continue online learning, so that should not increase unless other needs are identified. So the reason that we wanted you to see this, and then certainly you can all ask questions, is that time is of the essence. And in particular, we're concerned about the device enablement because inventory is rapidly declining for these things if we can get them at all. And so, there may be multiple mechanisms for getting there. Ken, I know you're looking into what we can do, what's legal. And I don't know if it's the kind of thing where if we spend operating funds now, can we get reimbursed or something like that later? We can discuss all of that, but I just wanted to make sure that your committee had all this information in front of you.
Okay.
Questions?
Okay. Ms. Zimmer, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, about the hourly employees. That's also an issue for town hall employees, and I think it should be a decision made jointly with the select board.
Yeah, have you guys?
Yeah, we understand that.
Yeah.
We have not. This is moving so fast. Stacy did send a copy of the memo to the select board to keep them in the loop and be transparent and apprise them of our needs, but with a very clear understanding that we recognize there are hourly employees across the board and that this is a larger discussion. So we do understand that. And that may take a little bit more time, which I think, again, may mean that these things are treated as pieces. We're not looking for, oh, please approve 91,000. We're trying to give you a sense of the size of the magnitude of the challenge here. But frankly, I think they should be treated separately.
Why do you think they should be treated separately?
Well, because the Chromebooks are point-in-time things,
Oh, no.
and
Okay.
there's some real urgency where the hourly employees and the food service losses, those are variable costs, and they're going to increase.
I'm sorry. I thought you meant that school employees should be treated differently than other employees.
Oh, no.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
I just want to reiterate, if I could, Dr. Shada, that this $66,000 only represents the cost, as Anne Louise mentioned, of those 3 weeks, but it's also for those two subsets of hourly employees that are not covered under the budget. I'm not aware of any town employees who may be paid through hourly employees who may be paid through revolving accounts, but there is a unique situation with our food service and our extended day staffs that are paid through, again, not through appropriation, but through revolving accounts. So those are the only concerns I'm highlighting here. The remainder are employees that are covered under the budget.
Okay, so just one other question, just to be clear, these run rates you're talking about are exclusive of any donations, charitable contributions, and the like. So it's not.
Yes.
Okay. So any help that we get in paying these costs just lowers this number.
Absolutely.
Well, help, yeah. But I mean, we're not maybe on food service. The food service losses is a past cost. The hourly employees, I don't think you're getting donations on that.
Well, I'm just saying in general. I just wanted, I guess there had been some discussion about charitable organizations helping out, and I just want to make sure that wasn't factored in here. So I didn't think it was.
Actually, to be honest, the Chromebook number actually is net of 50 units that have been offered for donation. Technically, the school committee has to accept donations, and that has not happened because we haven't had a meeting. So I'm kind of presumptively assuming they're going to accept the donation, but that is a net number.
Okay. So, okay. Any members that have questions? I'll just throw open the floor for this because I don't think there will be many questions. I think it's pretty apparent, but nobody's pinging me or raising their hands online. So if you have a question, just state your name and ask it. Okay. I don't hear anything, so we'll proceed. Does anybody on the school committee, I mean, and again, in the interest of time, I'd ask it to keep it extremely brief. Anybody have anything they want to say, about any of the things we've discussed? And you don't have to say anything. I'm just asking, giving people the opportunity. Okay.
Ken?
Yep.
I wanted to wait. This is Anne Louise. I wanted to wait for the committee in case anyone did have anything. I just want to ask that as you move forward over the next 48 hours, I know, as I said, that that a couple of these items are going to take a little more conversation. They have to be looked at in the context of the town and talked about with select board or whatever. But if there's any way, I don't know if you're waiting to reconvene for another week, but unofficially, if you can convey what you believe the latitude of the Finance Committee is and the options in potentially funding these Chromebooks, or how we can work with you on that so that we can begin planning, because the sooner we place an order, the more likely we are to actually get devices and be able to implement distance learning. The week could be dramatic.
Okay. Well, we as a committee, we will discuss that when we're done with this. The immediate discussion. The committee that's on the phone will have a discussion about what to do about the Chromebooks, because there may be mechanisms, or at least I know of mechanisms where when we're talking $20,000, we can deal with that if the committee wants to deal with that. So,
okay.
As far as just a general statement on our emergency powers, the answer is we don't know, and that's because the law is very ambiguous about what happens when all government basically stops because of a virus. So we're waiting for some clarification on that. So I don't particularly know, but obviously we have things like the reserve fund at our disposal, at least in the short term. Okay.
Thank you.
I did. Hold on a second here. I did have one other comment I wanted to make, though, Ann Louise and Dr. Jackson. Just make sure to keep us informed as this situation evolves. Obviously, we recognize it's very fluid, but as you get better data or a clearer picture, just make sure you're passing it along to the FinCom so we can keep track of what's going on financially.
We will do that.
Okay. Now, since just to be clear, Ms. Shaughnessy had a question, I will point out also that for those of you who are on the video, you can virtually raise your hand if you want to be recognized. I know people are chatting me saying they want to be recognized, but if you raise your hand, I see that faster than looking at the chat window. So, Ms. Shaughnessy, go right ahead.
Thank you. This is unrelated to what we've been talking about, but I did want to tell everybody, since we are all taxpayers in Holliston and worried about our fire department, that they are on hour 10 of the ongoing fire down at Cross Street. The fire is not under control. It's a recycling plant. It's now at 7 alarms. But I'm very happy to report that I just got a call from Tom, and no firefighter injuries have been reported. I thought everyone would want to know. Have a good thought for our firefighters and all of the mutual aid folks, and the state is on site, and canteen trucks are on site, and have a good thought for them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that, I guess that concludes the presentation from the school committee for tonight. Before we adjourn for the evening, I would like to discuss with the members of the Finance Committee what the sentiments are concerning and basically allowing or giving the school committee permission to pursue the $21,000 for the Chromebooks, given the necessity for the virtual learning that is likely coming up soon. So I'll throw the floor open to the Finance Committee members to hear opinions on what people think we should do. We do not have to, no, Ann Louise, I will say this, right? While we're waiting to find out what our powers may be, if we as a committee are okay with you spending that money, you can always spend it out of your budget, and we'll make it whole when we find out how.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm choking.
So that's okay. So okay, Ms. Nersessian, you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I think if the Chromebooks are necessary in order to advance the learning, to enable them to do learning remotely, I think my vote would be to move that forward right now.
Okay. Any other members of the Finance Committee? Just you don't ask to be recognized. You can just chime in. Just state your name.
Vin here. I agree with
Okay, Dan
first. You go.
Yeah.
I'm good with it.
Okay.
I was just going to reiterate, same as Sue. I agree with her.
Okay.
Michelle.
Yep. Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, Michelle Zemer, I agree too.
Okay. Mr. Maxwell, do you have an opinion?
I agree.
Okay. Mr. Sparrow?
I definitely agree.
Okay, then what I would like is I'd like someone to make a motion that we authorize or I wouldn't say authorize, but voice our consent with the school department expending $21,750 for the purchase of additional Chromebooks to facilitate distance learning during this emergency.
So moved by Dan.
Okay.
Second by Sue.
Okay. This, as the remote rules require a roll call vote for all votes, as I stated at the beginning.
Ken, I would just like to say, Dan, I'm not even sure really we need to vote on this per se, or can vote on this per se, because we don't really have anything to vote on that we have actually power to do. It's more just a sort of a
Correct. But
I'm just saying it's more just a sort of a sign that we are going to find a way to pay for it later.
okay, we can. Somebody else was going to say something.
It was Anne Louise. That was the piece. I just wanted to be. First of all, I think we would appreciate the vote because it goes on the record then, even if whatever. But but as long as it's with the understanding that you can make us whole if we spend it out of our budget, because we have to vote on it. But I want to give Brad the flexibility to make decisions as fast as he can.
Yeah, I think we should vote. I'm just saying I don't think it actually legally has any binding sort of.
Yes, that's why I recognize that. That's why I said it's an advisory vote, but it's recording our approval of them making the expenditure.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Go for your roll call. Sorry.
Okay, so I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Maxwell.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Sparrow.
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian.
Yes.
Mr. Alfred.
Aye.
Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Ms. Zemer.
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes, so the motion is carried 7-0. So go ahead and buy your Chromebooks. Not that you needed that vote, but now you have our consent to do so. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Is there anything else on the Finance Committee, from the Finance Committee membership, that we need to address tonight? If so, feel free to speak up now.
Ken, I just would ask if the school committee could just keep us apprised as things evolve and continue to evolve moving forward, as numbers may change and thoughts may change around different initiatives and costs that they're going to have to assume. So just keeping us up to date would be helpful.
You have our commitment on that.
Okay. Okay. So if there is no further business of the Finance Committee this evening, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Maxwell, motion to adjourn.
Okay, so I'll give that one to Dan, and Tim is a second. Okay. Okay, that again requires a roll call vote. Okay, Mr. Maxwell.
Yes.
Mr. Sparrow.
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian.
Yes.
Mr. Alfred.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Ms. Zemer.
Yes.
Yes, and I vote yes. Therefore, the meeting is adjourned. I would ask everybody at home on the phone to just stick around for 2 more minutes so we can wrap it up on TV here. This concludes the Tuesday, March 17th meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for everyone for staying for a very long meeting tonight, and we appreciate your staring at my face for 3 hours because no one else is in the room from the committee. But that concludes our business for tonight. So thank you and good night. Stay safe, everybody.